If the BYU Cougars have aspirations of playing in the Big 12 championship this fall and obviously advancing to the college football playoff, they have to have a number of things fall in their favor. But there is one factor above all others that I think BYU needs to have go in their favor, and we're talking about it on today's show.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? I'm Jake Hatch, your host here on Locked On Cougars, resident BYU insider. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. And more importantly, thank you to all of you who are everydayers with us right here on your original daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app today, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege to get $20 off your first purchase. Coming up on today's show, we're talking about BYU, the biggest key factor to their chances of making a Big 12 title run this fall. We'll also talk about BYU basketball. The path to March Madness is clearing up in the aftermath of their Baylor win. We'll get into that. And we'll also get to our weekly mailbag with our Locked On Cougars Insider Group, them submitting their questions. We're actually going to kick off today's show, though, with one of those questions. Ethan sent in a question, and it's a two-parter. He said, Jake, do you know when the Big 12 is officially going to announce BYU's football schedule? That's a great question in and of itself. Second part was, he said, if you were able to pick BYU's schedule that would give them a chance to win the most games possible, what would it be? Well, Ethan, you stepped right into my wheelhouse. Now, to the first part of the question, I have been expecting the schedule to come out any day now. It came out essentially this week last year. Could that come out today? Could it come out tomorrow? TBD. Mac Rhodes, Baylor's AD, was on Sikkim 365 Sports, or I think it's now just 365 Sports down there in Waco, and told the guys, Paul Catalina and company, that the schedule from the Big 12, the official full Big 12 schedule, is supposed to be out within the week. So that could be, like I said, today, tomorrow, early next week, over the weekend. They wouldn't do that over the weekend. But the bigger point is it's coming any day now. To get to Ethan's second part of his question, where would I like to see BYU's schedule lay out, and how would I lay it out if I were the schedule maker that could wave a magic wand and help BYU make a run at the Big 12 title? So like I said, this is what you came for. If you're watching this on YouTube, I went through and laid out how I believe BYU's schedule would best favor them. Now, we know 3 of the dates so far for BYU. We know their non-conference slate. They'll open up the season on August 30th at LaVell Edwards Stadium against Portland State in their annual FCS game. The following week, September 6th, Stanford, the Cardinal, come to town. And then you'll have currently an open week in week 3. And then week 4, September 20th, they're on the road at East Carolina. Now, this is a season, speaking of 2025, much like 2024, that will allow for double buys. That's just the way that the calendar lays out. There's 14 weeks for 12 games. So BYU will have the opportunity to have double buys like they did last year. I don't want them to take a bye after week 2. That's just my personal opinion on the matter. I think BYU would like to play as many games early on. So I think that BYU, if I were able to, like I said, to lay out the schedule for the Big 12 for BYU, I would have BYU open up their Big 12 season on September 13th and have them on the road. Yes, 2 straight road games, but I make it a regional game, and I make them cross the Rockies, that hour and 30-minute flight to Denver, head up to Boulder, and take on Coach Prime and the Colorado Buffaloes. Yes, you heard it right. The rematch from the Alamo Bowl. It would have national interest, obviously, early on in the season with those two after their thrilling Alamo Bowl showdown. We don't know what the Buffs will look like after Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter, so it's a great time to get them early on in the season. And like I said, it's regional travel when you have to following week make the clear cross-country trek to East Carolina. I think you play back-to-back road games after back-to-back home games and essentially get your Big 12 season off on a positive note. Now, after week 4, we go to East Carolina. Would you take the bye week there? I would not. I would actually finish out the month of September, but I'd have it as a home game where you bring West Virginia clear across the country to face you. Now, Rich Rodriguez is a brand new head coach, or the second-time head coach at West Virginia. The one thing that Rich Rod knows is elite offense. I think you want to get West Virginia early on in the season before they start to figure some things out. Make them make the cross-country trek to Provo at the end of September and get out of the month of September with your first 5 games intact. And then you finally hit the bye week. I think that the General Conference weekend, it used to be traditionally BYU would play a Utah State or another team on a Friday night. Well, last year, the Big 12 actually made it BYU's first bye week. I think that's actually an ideal slot to take the bye again this year. So the weekend of October 4th, I would have BYU take the first bye week. And then the following week, I'd send them right back out on the road. But we all know that the Big 12 has announced, or they've got plans to have each team essentially in the conference play a Friday game during the season. I would ask them to send us to Cincinnati, the second furthest road trip. Obviously, you're headed back to Nippert Stadium. I would play it on a Friday night coming off that bye week. Yes, it's one less day of preparation, but you already had the bye week. So you got essentially the full 2 weeks to prepare. Play that Friday night on national television, and then get back home. And I would go right back out on the road the following week to Iowa State. Why would you do that, Jake? Well, I think the simple fact is Cincinnati with Scott Satterfield, I don't know what to make of Cincinnati. So I'm banking on them being a little bit down, and then you have a huge game against Iowa State, a team that most BYU fans think stole the Cougars' spot in the Big 12 title game this past year. You go right back out on the road to Ames, Iowa, but get it out of the way. I think you play those back-to-back road games in the middle of October, and then essentially you're going to be playing with house money the rest of the season in my mind, because then you come back home to finish October against the TCU Horned Frogs in late October. I think that would be an ideal situation. Now, could you flip-flop that where you play at Cincinnati, come home to TCU, and go right back out to Iowa State? Maybe so. I mean, the more I think about that, it actually makes more sense, because I have BYU second bye week the first week of November. It's actually November 1st. It's the day after Halloween. I think BYU takes their second bye week there if I were able to lay this out. So actually, I'm going to make a little bit of a change there. I would say at Cincinnati, home to TCU, at Iowa State, and then rest up for the stretch run here going into the month of November. And that would include then in November, you'd open up on the road after the bye week at Texas Tech. Obviously, the Red Raiders have aspirations of doing some big things with all of the transfer portal noise that they made this offseason. I'd have BYU come back home and send the pretty boys from Orlando, UCF, Scott Frost and the Knights, bring them to Provo in the middle of November and let them freeze their you-know-what's off in Provo. Get them out here. Then go to Arizona, where obviously in Tucson, it's a little more pleasant in late November. Play that road game at Arizona. And then, yes, I am manifesting it. I want to see BYU and Utah, with Utah coming to Provo on November 29th, Thanksgiving weekend. Give it to me. Scott, just give it to me. I need it. I need it on rivalry weekend. I know that the Big 12 has said that they want to move these around and stratify them and get the biggest eyeballs on them. I don't care. Play it on rivalry weekend. Give it to me, Brett Yormark. Please, please, please. That's the way I want to see it lay out. And honestly, I think with the way that this lays out, it would give BYU the best mix of easier games against what are projected to be the harder games and mixing them up. You don't want to see a proverbial murderer's row pop up where all of a sudden you're playing at Texas Tech, home to Utah, at Iowa. You don't want to see those big dogs, or the proverbial big dogs, I should say, or some of the favorites in the conference. You don't want to see them in back-to-back weeks. This is the ideal schedule I would make. Is it going to be anywhere close to what the Big 12 is going to announce? I would hope so, but this is the type of schedule that I think could give BYU the best chance at making a run at the Big 12 title game. I don't think BYU is going to emerge from this schedule unscathed. There are too many pitfalls and tough teams on it to think that BYU can run the table. But hey, they were 11-2 and missed by the skin of their teeth this past year. They were obviously 10-2 going into the postseason, but could 10-2 get it done this year? Yeah, very well could. And it sure looks like the Big 12, it's going to be a really, really topsy-turvy conference. And it's going to be an interesting situation to see how these teams deal with it. So what do you think? Did I do a good job? Like I said, I made that minor edit. I actually decided to send BYU home road in the month of October. But regardless, what do you think? Do you think that would be the ideal schedule? What would you like to see? Where would you like to see BYU go early in the season versus late in the season? I love the idea of bringing UCF across the country in November. They will not know what hit them. Remember, Houston, the final weekend of the season this past year, they had not played in a game. I think it was sub 50 degrees the entire year, and it was like in the teens when they played that late night in November. I love when those southerly climb schools have to come up to the mountains in late November and they're like, woohoo, this is not very comfortable. But BYU, they're all about it. So I think that would be an ideal schedule. But like I said, feel free to weigh in with your thoughts. Comment below if you're watching this on YouTube. Send it in via social media to myself at Jacob C. Hatch on X or Twitter. Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, also for Locked On Cougars, if you want to weigh in that way, but always appreciate your guys' feedback. All right. So there you go. That's the football element. Obviously, the path to Big 12 supremacy, college football playoff. Well, for the BYU basketball program, a lot of us have been wondering, okay, what's it going to take for BYU to get back into the mix with a chance to make it in to the big dance in March? Well, after their win against Baylor earlier this week, that path appears to be clearing up. What does BYU have to do to make that run and get into March Madness? We'll delve into that next right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Now, Game Time is here for you guys to get you out to the events you want to go to. And more importantly, they want you to be able to go out to sporting events, concert theaters. If you're a Super Bowl, if you have aspirations to go to the Super Bowl, Game Time has got an incredible ability to get you out to the events you want to go to. And this year, Game Time is making it even easier to create those unforgettable moments with their new feature called Game Time Picks. It filters out all the fluff and shows you only the best deals on great seats so you can focus on what matters most, simply being there at the event you're at. Game Time Picks, obviously, they allow you to get the best seats available, but also our friends at Game Time have an incredible super deal feature. They have their all-in pricing feature in the app. You toggle it, you'll know exactly what you're paying right up front, fees included. They also have event cancellation protection, job loss protection, and also the lowest price guarantee. It's an incredible thing that they are doing for our listeners. So take the guesswork out of buying your tickets and do it with our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app today, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create that account, redeem the promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. That's LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, and of course, it's all guaranteed. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. All right, the BYU men's basketball program, on the heels of their win against Baylor earlier this week, have jump-started their chances of making the NCAA tournament. Now, that may sound like hyperbole, but it really isn't, my friends. After BYU beat Baylor, they jumped up on the KenPom ratings from 38 to 31. To jump 8 spots, it's a pretty impressive deal for BYU. They're now 31st in the KenPom ratings. Obviously, the Big 12 is well represented in the KenPom ratings, but traditionally, as I understand it, and Ken Pomeroy has been a really good friend of my radio stations for years. If you're inside the top 40 at the end of the year, you're traditionally going to be in the NCAA tournament in his ratings. The bigger point to be made here is after BYU beat Baylor, bracketologists like Joe Lunardi out there started to really think, okay, BYU's finally got a Q1 win, a quad 1 win. Now, their 7 of their next 8 games are also Q1 games. BYU is going through a really, really tough schedule upcoming here. But if they can manage it well, and I think manage it well means you're 500 at worst, they should stay right there on the proverbial bubble when it comes to the NCAA tournament, if not pushing to get in. After BYU beat Baylor and got that Q1 win, Joe Lunardi yesterday had them in the first 4 out territory in his bracketology. UCF is one of the last 4 in currently of that latest bracketology from ESPN. So I look at this, and so long as BYU manages, like I said, their schedule here well, and it's not going to be easy because going to UCF, coming home to face off against an Arizona team who is absolutely dynamite right now, they will be ranked by the time they show up in Provo next Tuesday. And just beyond that, you look at just the schedule for BYU going forward. If they can make a run here over the next 8 games and go 500, yeah, they're absolutely going to stick right there on the bubble. But if not even push into the actual bracketology field of being an at-large team. BYU is not ranked. They're 6th currently in Big 12 play at 5-4 in conference. Remember, last year they finished in 5th place and ultimately got that pretty good seed. Now, don't remind me of the Duquesne deal in the actual NCAA tournament, but they had a really, really favorable seed as the 5th place team, as a 5th place team in the Big 12 last year. They're in 6th place right now. If they can hover right there, kind of in the middle of the pack in the Big 12, the rest of the way, it's going to require wins and losses, and that's just the nature of what the Big 12 is going to do to this basketball program. But if they can hang in there, and it sure looked like that win against Baylor, the fact that they ground out a really, really close win after they had lost a number of those earlier on the season, seemed like they learned their lessons there. You had starring performances from your two phenom freshmen in Jaeger Demon and Cannon Catchings. You had vets step up in big moments from Richie Saunders. You need all of this to come together, but it sure looks like the Cougars have turned the corner. And if they indeed have done that with a 3-game win streak in their back pocket, can they make it 4 in a row against UCF? And then can they spring an upset over Arizona in what should be an absolutely epic atmosphere at the Marriott Center next week? You start to string together some success here, and it's going to very clearly lay out. You keep winning, or you keep pace, I guess I should say, in the Big 12. You, like I said, you kind of hover right there with the rest of the pack. Houston, Arizona, they have pulled away from the rest of the conference. Houston is undefeated at 9-0, whereas you've got Arizona 8-1, but BYU at 5-4. They're in 6th place right now. They're tied for 6th. That's a good spot to be. You can hover right there, and just based on the metrics, and Ken Pomeroy said it on my radio station, the KSL Sports Zone, just a couple of weeks ago. If BYU could go 10-10, he thought 11-9 would get it done for BYU to make the NCAA tournament. He thought so 2 games over 500, 11-9 record would get it done. He thought 10-10 might even get BYU into the tournament. And I would take that. At this juncture, based on some of the struggles we have watched with this BYU basketball team, wouldn't you accept the fact that just making the NCAA tournament field, seed be whatever it is, just get in the tournament field and see what happens? It's a crazy, crazy thing. And obviously, there's been a ton of aspiration, a ton of expectation from Kevin Young and what he's expected to do as BYU's head coach. But I think that the nice part is this team is figuring out in real time. There were major concerns, and I harbored a lot of them. I've talked about them on this podcast. If you're an everydayer, you know I was harboring some major concerns about this team not even 2 or 3 weeks ago when they were 1-3 after their first 4 games in conference. And I'm like, wow, how are they going to find their way and claw their way back up into the mix of these things? Well, they've done that. They have, in the Big 12 era so far, they've never had a 3-game win streak. That's the incredible part about this. They made some history with that win over Baylor. Can you make it 4 in a row against UCF? And if you do that, if you still win against UCF on the road, then I would actually consider that to be like a win and a half in some ways, because road wins come at an absolute premium in the Big 12, and getting one on the road in Orlando would be a really, really nice feather in the cap of this basketball program. But getting back to the original premise here, it's crazy what happens when you get a Q1 win, the first one that BYU has all season, and suddenly I remember seeing some consternation out there on social media, etc. Well, BYU's got all these great metrics. Why are they not on the bubble watch? It's because they didn't have a Q1 win. You get that Q1 win, you break the seal there, and all of a sudden it's like, hey, okay, there you go, BYU. Let's get you in the mix here. So, yeah, there's work to be done. They're currently, like I said, on the periphery, on the outside looking in as among the first 4 out. But you do your work, you handle your business, you go out there and win the games in front of you, as many as you can with this stretch of games. Like I said, 7 of the next 8 Q1s. Geez, if you're 4-4 in those, that's going to be 3, maybe 4 Q1 wins. And with 5 of those in your back pocket, yeah, Joe Lunardi's going to have a hard time keeping you out of the NCAA tournament field. So that everything is measuring up right now. The BYU is on the right path, and they have righted the ship. That's a credit to Kevin Young, as a credit to this team, because once again, they seem to be floundering early on in Big 12 play. I think they have grown up. I think they have formed a more cohesive bond than what I saw earlier this season. It felt like at points earlier on the season, different guys were pulling different ways. I think that Kevin Young and his staff have channeled everybody and gotten them on the same page. And if that is indeed the case, this BYU team could make a nice little run here and could make some noise. And that would be the fun part about what the NCAA tournament holds. Is obviously they want redemption for the one and done nature of last year in Duquesne. They hold that ignominious mark of being the team that's appeared the most in the NCAA tournament without a Final Four appearance. I'm not saying BYU is going to make the Final Four this year. In fact, I would bet highly against them doing that. I just want to see BYU get in the tournament, because with the talent they've brought in, the expectations, what you've done on the recruiting sphere, everything revolving around BYU basketball, to fall short of making the NCAA tournament, I think would be a really poor look for year one under Kevin Young. But if you can get into the field, like I said, I don't care about the seed, just get into the big dance. that would be enough for me to feel like, okay, BYU's figured some things out here. That they more than figured things out. They took the punches right on the chin and they punched back and found a way out of the corner and made their way in to March Madness. And that, like I said, for me, that would be enough. And I welcome your feedback on that as well. If you think I'm up in the night thinking just making the tournaments enough, hey, maybe not. If you don't think BYU is going to make the big dance, I also welcome that feedback. But I think right now, things are looking up for BYU basketball, but there is a ton of work and a ton of tough games to come. But it'll be fun to watch how they battle in these upcoming games. Obviously, UCF coming up on Saturday afternoon. All right, we will finish up today's show with your questions. Our Locked On Cougars Insider Group submitted their questions each week. We'll fling the mailbag open, and we'll answer as many of those in the time remaining coming up next right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. As I mentioned, Locked On Cougars Insider Group, one of the things we reserve the right is their ability to ask questions each week. They're given the right to be in the mailbag. So if you want to be a part of it, you get a 2-week free trial, just $5 a month beyond that to be a part of the Insiders Group, get the inside scoop on all things BYU. I'm hearing $5 a month, but once again, you get a 2-week free trial before you pay anything to be a part of the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. Hit the link in the show notes below, whether you're watching this on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, and join us on the Locked On Cougars podcast, Insiders Group, not podcast is here. Insiders Group is what we want you guys to join. All right, let's see. Couple of things here. What name should we be keeping an eye on for filling key roles for next season with players that are moving on, including Lassiter if he doesn't come back, namely Batty, Pay, Etienne, Wakely, etc. That comes from Andy. It's a great question. Now, situation with Darius Lassiter still very much undetermined. As far as I'm aware, the NFL draft declaration deadline is February 7th. So he's got another week to ultimately make his call on what he's going to do. But I think that decision's already been made. And I don't know what it is. I just, the quiet nature of it all makes me think that he may have decided to move on. Maybe that JUCO rule didn't work out in his favor. But bigger point to be made, the wide receiver position, they can absorb his loss and absorb it quite well. And I don't mean to denigrate or downplay losing Darius Lassiter, but JoJo Phillips, Parker Kingston, Cody Hagan. Just look at the guys. Dominique McKenzie. There's a lot of talent in that wide receiver room that's chomping at the bit to get more reps, and I think they would step up in that circumstance. Now, Batty, that's an interesting one. Tyler Batty, obviously, at the East West Shrine Bowl this week, showing out, it looks like, in those individual drills. They actually will play that Shrine Bowl tonight. If you want to tune in and watch that, it's on the NFL Network. But Tyler Batty, I think it's going to be some of the younger players. I'm thinking about guys like Vili Puha or a Kini Lafono-Hema. Like, think of some of the young defensive ends BYU's brought in recently. They're going to step up and play in that role. Heck, maybe even a guy like Hunter Clegg, a 4-star prospect coming home off a mission. If he can get himself in shape, no reason to think that he can't challenge for playing time early on. I know that a guy like Bodie Schoonover will have aspirations of taking over that job. There's a lot of young talent to step up there. Connor Pay, I think it's Bruce Mitchell. I think Aaron Roderick kind of lifted the lid on that, saying that Bruce Mitchell was absolutely phenomenal when Pay was out, when he joined us on the KSL Sports Zone recently. So keep an eye on there. Caleb Etienne, I think it's Andrew Gentry who fills that spot at left tackle. Right tackle, I think you could put Austin Leusa there, or one of the younger offensive tackles who are developing. And then Crew Wakely, it's Raider DeMooney's job. Like that, that's a pretty simple one because Raider took the job and stood out. He was a phenomenal showing for him in that Alamo Bowl game. So I think that Wakely's spot goes to Raider DeMooney. Other questions coming in here. There's some good ones here. Who do you expect to be BYU's highest rated in NCAA 26, and what is the rating? Ooh. All right, I am going to say it's going to be Chase Roberts, and I think his rating will be like a 91. Could be crazy, could be outside the box, but I do think, oh, no, actually, no, I'm going to retract that. It's going to be Isaiah Glasker. Isaiah Glasker, like a 93. Give me that. But I think those two will be the biggest ones. Now, Taylor also asked this, for football, which incoming freshmen, redshirts included, you feel like will have a breakout year, and then sophomores you feel like will take a next big step? Ooh, I would say freshman, keep an eye on Hunter Clegg. I think that just his God-given talent, what I saw from him in high school, if he's able to get healthy, he's going to be a standout. Cody Hagan, keep an eye on him at wide receiver. I think he's got all the potential to be a standout there. Sophomores taking a big step. Well, Isaiah Glasker was a sophomore last year. Can I take him as a junior? Okay, that's a joke. But I think a guy like a Bodie Schoonover at defensive end could take a big step. I would also look at potential freshmen. Man, there's a bunch of them coming to mind. Pokai Haunga at running back. I think he showed signs in the Alamo Bowl and the limited reps he got. They call him Glitch for a reason. He's got all kinds of moves. I think that he could make an emergence. The nice part is there's a lot of talent, a lot of young talent on this squad, Taylor, that I think is going to have an opportunity to step up, and I hope they do because they pull it off. BYU could be a very, very good team there. Jake asked this. We are always tracking missionaries who leave, but what are the ones coming back? I would like an update on RMs for this upcoming season, even 2026, who's still committed, etc. I will need to do some homework on that, Jake. I will get back to you on that. It's a great question because with the incoming roster reductions, some guys may lose their spots, and that's unfortunate. But it's just the simple fact of what we're dealing with on this side of things when it comes to the future of college football. All right, let's see. Donovan, now that BYU basketball has won 3 in a row, should they be considered for the NCAA tournament? Yeah, I just talked about it. They absolutely should. I think they've worked their way in onto the bubble and need to stay there. And then Jake also asked this, after the last few games of BYU basketball, what are your new expectations for this team? Make the tournament. I just answer those questions straight up. Brady says, I agree 100% on your coaching analysis. Oh, catching's analysis. I talked about it in our Wednesday show about Cannon catching, sitting the final like 8 minutes of that game, including overtime. So I was watching, couldn't believe he wasn't in the game. The offense sputtered, and Baylor, including Wright, was getting what they wanted when they wanted. Don't agree with the decision. Speaking of Kevin Young, he seemed a little defensive about it. I think coaches all think the decisions are good ones because they win. It's an elixir winning that blinks them to bad decisions. Maybe they won in spite of bad decisions. Hope he makes smarter decisions down the road. Okay, Brady, I can respect that. The question needed to be asked, and we asked it. Also asked Cannon if there was any frustration with him sitting out. Said, I just wanted to win. So credit to him for being a good teammate and making a positive statement in that respect. But one of those interesting things that just it plays out that way. So it's kind of the nature of the beast when it comes to college football. But I just look at it and say, you know what? It is what it is. Maybe they did win in spite of it, but at the same time, I think it's all water under the bridge at this point because all they want to do is they just want to win games, simply put. Now, final questions here from Kent. Football-related question, but you've heard of what's happening with Darius Laster. I have not, like I said, Kent. I will be sure to dig into that. If I get anything, Insiders Group will hear it first. I'll just say that if you want to get the inside scoop. The other thing, what do you think about the not too early poll disrespecting BYU again? What do you think? Puts a chip on their shoulder. And I absolutely think BYU embraces that. And on the basketball front, Kent asked this. Basketball question, but what's it going to take for BYU, in your opinion, to get an at-large bid into the tournament? Do you think they need to be more than 500 the rest of the way? I just talked about it. 11-9, according to Ken Palm, would do the tricks. That's just over 500. But he also thought that 10-10 could get it done as well. Just tread water. Stay in the mix. Stay in the middle of the pack with the rest of the teams. You stick around 500 and grind out, make it maybe an 11-9 record. That would get you in the tournament. And I think that'd be a positive development for year one for Kevin Young to make the NCAA tournament. Remember how much turnover this program experienced with Mark Pope exiting, Kevin Young coming in. There's been a dramatic shift with this team, but getting back to the tournament, despite all that, I think it'd be a pretty massive accomplishment. And I will be rooting for it just from my perch here. All right, that is going to do it for this edition of Locked On Cougars. Thank you as always for all your support. Thank you to the Insiders Group for your guys' questions. Always appreciate you guys weighing in with your thoughts. Appreciate any and all feedback you guys provide to the show. I truly do. I take it all under advisement, good, bad, or indifferent. But as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Please subscribe, rate, review, share it with your family and friends. Help us continue to build this audience. And of course, a big thank you to all of you once again for being everydayers with us right here on Locked On Cougars.